Hello and welcome to my presentation on social problem thinking. Today is going to be all about problems, and I would like to start this presentation with a quote that shows the importance of problem thinking. Albert Einstein has supposedly said, "If I have 1 hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes finding the solution." And I really like this quote because it shows that we first need a deep understanding of the problem we want to tackle before we can start creating solutions. Our agenda for today is to first define social problems and then describe them in the light of social systems. We will then further explore the need for empathy when engaging in such systems, and then end this presentation with creating problem statements. So let's dive right into the first question and ask, what are social problems? Probably you can already name a few because some of them are global or being discussed in the news, like for example climate change or terrorism or the refugee movement or the disparity between developed and developing countries. Others are more of a national scope, like poverty or child labor or criminality, for example. When we look at a theoretical definition, we can state a social problem as any condition or behavior that has negative consequences for people within a society, and that is generally recognized as a condition or behavior that needs to be addressed. This definition gives us two important facts. First, there are people in a society suffering from this social problem, and second, the social problem has to be recognized and labeled as important enough to be addressed. So one crucial point in tackling a social problem is raising awareness within a society. For this presentation, I want to use one social problem as an example. Therefore, let me introduce you to Dennis, who will accompany us through the rest of the video. And without telling you the social problem I chose, you probably already have an idea about the challenge when you look at him. And that's a very important insight we have to be aware of. Either it is ourselves or the society that have stereotypes or prejudices towards a specific group of people. So whenever we engage with the people we want to help, we should reflect on the stereotypes we might have, because those could alter our behavior when we address them. In the end, we always want to know the person behind the stereotype. So the challenge I chose is homelessness, which is an increasing problem within Germany. More than 500,000 people are supposedly without a housing space in Germany, from which around 52,000 people live most of the year on the streets. Those two numbers show the broad scope of homelessness in Germany and also function as an example for the stereotypes we might have. Because our stereotypes emerge from the people we see on the streets. What we don't see is the hidden homelessness. And especially youth people hide their homelessness by sleeping on the couches of friends. Therefore, I would like to specify my challenge a little bit and concentrate on the hidden homelessness of youth people. Which means I also have to change the avatar of Dennis, who now looks like this. Let's quickly go back to the definition of social problems. There we learned that a social problem affects people within a society, meaning that the social problem occurs always within something bigger. We call that a system. And that's another important learning insight. Social problems are part of a social system. So what's a system exactly? A social system is an interconnected set of elements that is coherently organized in a way that achieves something. When we look closely at this definition, we can see that a system consists of three kinds of things: different elements, the interconnections between those elements, and the function or purpose of the system. An example for a social system can be a school, or a family, or a company, or a national economy, or a society. The important thing to remember is that between the elements of a system, so for example, if we take the school, between the pupils and the teachers, or between the teachers and the principal, or between the principal and the pupils, there are interrelationships and interdependencies that form a specific structure. And this structure is most of the times quite complex. And we have to be aware of that when we want to address one element directly, because we might not have to address it directly, but another element, or more specifically, the interdependency connection between those two elements. Let's make that a little bit more visible by looking at the social systems of Dennis. One system is his family, although he doesn't have contact with them right now. So his brother, his sister, his parents and grandparents. Another one is his peer group, meaning his friends. With those he likes to hang around always in the same park. So they're also part of the system of this specific neighborhood. The city he lives in is a system, as well as the society. Now that we learned that we live in systems, we have to learn how to think in systems. Why is it important? Well, a good understanding of systems helps us to identify the leverage points that lead to desired outcomes. Meaning, we're able to see and identify those points we have to tackle to achieve an improvement in the lives of our beneficiaries. Also, systems thinking leads to a holistic perspective. We're able to see the person embedded in a specific structure that affects his or her life situation. Furthermore, system thinking prevents rash solutions. We first have to engage in a deep problem and system analysis before we can start creating solutions. So now is the question, how do we apply system thinking? Well, through asking questions to ourselves, to the people we're addressing, and to every other stakeholder in the system. And I would like to present you one tool that helps with system thinking. It's called the Impact Gaps Canvas. With the canvas, you can map out the landscape of a social problem. A landscape can also represent different systems that are connected to one social problem. On the left side, you have questions, many of them systemic, that focus on understanding the problem by asking questions like who or what is impacted, what is holding the current status quo in place, and what other issues is this problem related to. The questions on the right help you to map out the solutions landscape. What has already been tried, what has worked and what hasn't, how are these efforts connected, things like that. In the middle is the impact gap. You can either explore this gap in a very broad and systemic scope and ask what is missing in the whole ecosystem of the solutions landscape, what regulations might be needed, how can lessons be shared, etc. Or you can explore this gap more explicitly and ask questions like, why did these efforts fail? What gaps are missing to solve the problem more completely? What parts of the model can be altered to achieve more impact for more people? The middle part, the landscape gap, gives you an overview on the whole system or the systems that are connected to your social problem. For filling the Impact Gaps canvas, you should talk or interview your beneficiaries. Whenever we want to understand a social problem, we do also have to understand the people who are affected by it. For a problem like homelessness, it could be that our life situation is pretty different from the one of a homeless person. To bridge this gap, we need to make use of our empathy. Empathy is the key in understanding our target group in the context of their problem or their life situation. The main guiding question when it comes to empathy is that you want to find out how does the other person thinks about the world. And you might have heard of the saying that empathy means to see the world through the eyes of someone else. Well, personally I don't like that saying because of course it's just not possible to see the world through the eyes of someone else. All we can do is try. In fact, empathy does not mean to see and feel and think the same thing as the other person. It means to be able to understand what the other person sees and feels and thinks. With this distinction, we also create a specific attitude towards other people. When we know that we are just not able to experience the world in the same way as someone else, we know that the other person will always be the expert of his or her life situation. Which means whenever we address one of our beneficiaries, we know that he or she will always be the expert on how does it feel to be directly affected by the problem. I would say we go a little bit deeper into that. So whenever we address someone who is suffering from any kind of problem, we want to know more about two things of their life. First, we want to know about their life situation. That's kind of the objective part of the life. And second, their life world, which is kind of the subjective part of their life. The life situation represents the living conditions of a person. Dennis' life situation could be something like this. He lives in Hamburg, he's 25 years old, he has no housing space, no income, he doesn't have any contact to authorities that could maybe help him. He has very little material possessions, but a lot of social contacts within the city. He dresses quite neatly, he's affected with rheumatism, and sometimes he's smoking weed. His life world, on the other hand, means his perception of his life situation. So how does he feel and think about his living conditions? This could look something like this. He doesn't see any chance of ever having his own apartment. He dreams of living a normal life, like having a job, driving a nice car, getting married. He would like to have contact to his siblings, not his parents. He would like to stay in Hamburg. He feels ashamed when he has to talk about his situation. He thinks that it's his fault that he doesn't have an own apartment, and he blocks every thought about his illness. Our aim as the people who want to emphasize with Dennis, we want to get to know both perspectives of his life. Whereas the first one is more easier to ask about, we have to be more sensible and empathic when we talk with him about his life world, which is of course a more personal topic. Applying and practicing empathy is all about asking questions. Whenever you address one of your beneficiaries, you should have 3 questions in mind. First, you should ask, what are they doing, saying, thinking, feeling? Second of all, how are they doing those things? And third of all, why are they doing those things? And the last one is aiming more for the inner motives. So feel free to interpret here whatever they are saying. After that, you might want to cluster your findings. And there's a tool for that called an empathy map. You can use this tool when you talk to one single person, as well as to cluster all the insights from all the people of your target group that you talk to. Empathy maps help you to unpack all the information and insights you have gathered. You should cluster your information into what are the people saying, what are they doing, how do they think about their life situation, how do they feel about it. Probably not all of the people you're going to talk to will give you a deep insight on their feelings. Then you should try to interpret what they said and how they behaved. Feel free to make assumptions here. So what's the next step after you gathered all that information? Now we want to create a problem statement. A problem statement can also be called an insight statement or a point of view statement, and it shows you deeper understanding of a problem. It normally consists of 1 or 2 sentences that state who are your beneficiaries, what is their most essential need, and what is the insight you gain about them. A problem statement then synthesizes the findings from your research, interviews, empathy maps. It creates the basis for your ideation process and guides your following actions. It shows you deeper understanding of your target group, their needs and the insights you gained upon them. It doesn't contain any aspects of a solution nor how to fulfill the needs of your target group. It has a focus narrow enough to frame the problem and make it manageable, but wide enough to enable you and your team to come up with a lot of different creative ideas. Let's make an example for our challenge of the hidden homelessness of youth people. We learned that a problem statement consists of 3 elements. First, the definition of the persons you're addressing. Second, their most essential need. And third, the insight you gained about those persons. For the problem of hidden homelessness of youth people, the problem statement could be: a young person who is homeless in the city of Hamburg, Germany, needs to have his own apartment in the city. He feels misunderstood by authorities and therefore lost trust in those. He lacks the motivation, trust and ideas of tackling his problem on his own. A problem statement like this will then guide you through the next steps of your process and establish the baseline on which you will create possible solutions. Now we're coming to an end of this presentation. I want to just quickly remind you that along your way of designing a business idea, you can always come back to the problem definition phase. The overall process is iterative, meaning you can always include the new insights you gain along your way by going 1 or more steps backwards. And as long as you stay open for improvement and alterations of your problem definition as well as your solution ideas, I'm pretty sure you're going to find the right solution to the right problem. That's the end of my presentation. I thank you very much for listening and hope you enjoy the next steps of this course.